All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into the most profound and, frankly, the bloodiest conflict in American history to answer a very specific historical inquiry. We're going to look directly at primary sources from the time, cut through all the noise, and get straight to the actual historical realities.
So here's the big central question we're tackling today. Was the immediate end of slavery the one and only driving force behind the Civil War right from the get-go? Or, were there other major political motivations pulling the strings? It sounds like a simple yes or no question, but as we're going to see, history is rarely that black and white. Let's get into it.
You can actually see exactly how this debate is framed in classrooms today with this source document. It's a pretty standard fill-in-the-blank worksheet, but it highlights some absolutely crucial vocabulary to help us unpack everything. We're talking words like compromise, economy, and most importantly, catalysts and nuance. We're going to lean heavily on those exact concepts today to map out the complexities of the era.
To really wrap our heads around the historical reality, here's our roadmap. First, the Civil War debate. Second, the core catalyst, slavery. Third, union above all. And finally, a complex political evolution.
All right, Part 1. The Civil War debate. Moving beyond simplified history.
So before the actual fighting broke out, we really have to acknowledge the absolute mess of overlapping regional differences. As that worksheet points out, for years, people have argued about what actually caused the conflict. The North and South were already deeply divided by their economies. You've got northern factories on one hand versus southern farming that was heavily reliant on slave labor on the other. Add in those intense political clashes over states' rights versus national power, and you can see the pressure building. And of course, the whole thing just boils over when the southern states finally seceded from the Union in 1861.
Moving into Part 2, the core catalyst, slavery, and what we're calling a striking moral convergence.
Okay, I want you to look at the unbelievable contrast between these two historical figures. On one side, Alexander H. Stephens, the Vice President of the Confederacy. On the other, Frederick Douglass, the legendary Northern abolitionist and formerly enslaved person. I mean, we are talking absolute opposite moral poles, literal enemies. And yet, if you look at exactly what they were saying in 1861, just as the war kicks off, there is this fascinating, undeniable convergence on what actually caused the violence.
Just weeks before the fighting even started, Stephens gives this infamous cornerstone speech down in Savannah, Georgia. And guys, his words are chillingly blunt. He explicitly states that their new government's foundation, its literal cornerstone, rests on the belief that a black man is not equal to a white man. He tells the crowd flat out that the Confederacy was established specifically to preserve the institution of slavery, period. So right there, from the very top of Southern leadership, slavery is named as the absolute catalyst. Now strikingly, in that exact same year, Frederick Douglass completely agreed on that fundamental root cause. Writing in his Northern newspaper, Douglass argued this wasn't some basic political dispute over flags or lines on a map. No way. It was a violent clash between two entirely different societies, one based on human freedom and one built on the chains of human slavery. He saw zero middle ground and called on the Union to wake up and destroy the power of the slaveholders. So despite coming from completely opposite moral universes, both the Confederate VP and the leading African-American abolitionist hit the nail on the head. The war was absolutely triggered by the institution of slavery.
Which brings us to Part 3, union above all, the yes but moment.
Now, if both sides knew slavery was the root cause, does that mean the North immediately went to war purely to abolish it? Well, this is where that vocabulary word nuance comes in. Nuance adds that subtle complexity. It helps us understand why moral causes and political actions don't always line up perfectly, especially right at the outbreak of a massive conflict.
To see this nuance in action, we have to look at August 1862. Over a year into this incredibly bloody conflict, President Abraham Lincoln writes a very public, official letter to Horace Greeley, an influential Northern newspaper editor. Now, abolitionists like Douglass had been heavily pressuring Lincoln to make the war strictly about ending slavery. Lincoln's response? It perfectly captures this political complexity.
The letter is just a brilliant illustration of nuance. He writes, and I quote, "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or to destroy slavery." He is literally telling the public that his official, primary political goal was not some immediate moral crusade for abolition. It was a desperate, purely political scramble to keep the nation from completely splitting apart. He says whatever he does regarding slavery, he does solely because he believes it'll help save the country.
So at this stage in the war, Lincoln is viewing everything through a lens of cold, hard political pragmatism. Breaking down his logic directly from that letter, he lays out three distinct options. He says he's willing to save the Union by freeing all the slaves, by freeing just some, or by freeing none at all. His ultimate priority was simply the survival of the United States. This demonstrates so clearly that while the war was absolutely caused by slavery, the North's official initial goal was saving the Union, not immediate abolition.
And finally, Part 4, a complex political evolution, synthesizing the root cause and the result.
All right, let's bring it all together and actually answer our central inquiry question. Was the Civil War purely fought over the abolition of slavery? Well, by synthesizing our sources, we get the whole picture. Slavery was, without a doubt, the undeniable cornerstone and root catalyst of the war, a fact agreed upon by both the Confederacy and Northern abolitionists. But the North's journey to embracing abolition as a central war aim, that was a slow, incredibly complex political evolution. For Lincoln and the North, the initial driving motivation was preserving the Union. The moral crusade for abolition eventually intertwined with that political goal, but it just wasn't the sole immediate trigger for the North's military action on day one.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this to chew on. We just saw how Lincoln's political goals eventually aligned with Douglas's moral cause as the Civil War evolved. So how do you see politics and morality intertwining in the conflicts going on in the world today? Do modern political leaders still prioritize pragmatic goals over moral absolutes? It is definitely something to think about the next time you're scrolling through the news. Thanks for hanging out with me for this deep dive into the sources. And hey, keep asking the complex questions.